Marcus Chun wiped the sweat from his forehead as he adjusted the plasma torch settings for the third time that morning. The repair shop on Station Gamma 7 wasn't much to look at, a cramped space wedge between a noodle stand and a black market cybernetics dealer, but it was his. After 15 years of military service fixing everything from broken laser rifles to damaged starship engines, civilian repair work felt almost peaceful. The bell above his door chimed. Though he couldn't see any customers through the maze of broken appliances, defunct robots, and salvaged ship parts that cluttered his workspace, Marcus set down his torch and navigated through the mechanical graveyard toward the front counter. What he found there made him blink twice. A creature no bigger than his thumb sat on his counter, its scales shimmering between deep emerald and gold in the artificial lighting. It had the unmistakable features of a dragon, albeit a miniature one, with delicate wings folded against its back, tiny horns protruding from its head, and the most expressive pair of amber eyes Marcus had ever seen. Those eyes were currently filled with what could only be described as desperate hope. In the dragon's claws, barely visible due to its size, was what appeared to be a small mechanical object. The tiny creature made a series of chittering sounds, holding up the object toward Marcus with an urgency that transcended language barriers. Marcus leaned down, careful not to make any sudden movements. He'd encountered many alien species during his military service, but never anything quite like this. The dragon's distress was palpable, and despite its size, there was an intelligence in its gaze that demanded respect. "Let me guess," Marcus said softly, extending his palm. "Something's broken?" The dragon hesitated for a moment, then carefully placed the object in Marcus's hand before scrambling up his arm to perch on his shoulder. Up close, Marcus could see that the item was indeed mechanical, a tiny, intricately crafted toy that resembled a miniature spaceship. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with details so fine they were almost impossible to see without magnification. Marcus made his way to his workbench, where he kept a high-powered magnification array originally designed for microchip repair. As he placed the toy under the scope, the dragon on his shoulder leaned forward, clearly invested in the process. The damage was immediately apparent. One of the toy's tiny wings had snapped off, and several microscopic components within its hull had shifted out of alignment. For something so small, the engineering was remarkably sophisticated. Marcus could see traces of what appeared to be a microfusion core, barely larger than a grain of sand, and a propulsion system that defied his understanding of physics. "This is some piece of work," Marcus murmured, more to himself than to his tiny companion. The dragon chittered in response, a sound that somehow conveyed both agreement and anxiety. Marcus had repaired countless devices over the years, but nothing had ever required this level of precision. The tools he normally used would be far too large for such delicate work. He'd need to improvise, possibly even fabricate new instruments just to handle components measured in micrometers. The first challenge was securing the toy in place without damaging it further. Marcus carefully constructed a miniature vise from spare parts, adjusting the pressure so it would hold the toy steady without crushing its delicate frame. The dragon watched every movement with intense focus, occasionally making soft sounds that Marcus interpreted as encouragement. For the broken wing, Marcus needed to create a replacement piece. He spent the better part of an hour crafting a component from a sliver of titanium carbon composite, using his plasma torch at its lowest possible setting to shape the metal. The dragon remained perched on his shoulder throughout the process, sometimes extending a tiny claw to point at specific areas of the toy. It was during this delicate work that Marcus began to notice something odd. The dragon's behavior suggested familiarity with the repair process itself. When Marcus reached for a particular tool, the creature would nod approvingly. When he hesitated over a component, unsure of its function, the dragon would emit different tones that seemed to guide his decisions. "You understand engineering, don't you?" Marcus asked, glancing at his companion. The dragon's amber eyes met his, and, for a moment, Marcus could have sworn he saw something ancient and knowing in that gaze. The microfusion core proved to be the most challenging component to repair. The containment field had collapsed when the wing broke off, causing the core to shut down. Marcus had worked on fusion systems before, but never anything this miniaturized. The tolerances were so precise that even a microscopic misalignment could prevent the system from functioning. As he worked, Marcus found himself talking to the dragon, explaining his process as if speaking to a fellow engineer. The magnetic containment field needs to be perfectly spherical, he said, adjusting a component with tweezers he'd modified for the task. Even a deviation of a few angstroms will cause the plasma to destabilize. The dragon listened intently, occasionally making what sounded like approving chirps. At one point, when Marcus was struggling with the field geometry, the tiny creature climbed down onto the workbench and used its claws to indicate a specific adjustment to one of the field generators. Following the dragon's guidance, Marcus made the modification, and the core's readings immediately improved. "How did you know that?" Marcus asked, staring at his diminutive assistant. The dragon simply tilted its head and made a sound that could have been a chuckle. Hours passed as Marcus worked on the intricate repairs. His back ached from hunching over the magnification array, and his eyes burned from the constant strain of working with components at the very edge of visible resolution. The dragon never left his shoulder, providing what seemed to be moral support through the most difficult moments. Finally, as the station's artificial day cycle shifted toward evening, Marcus made the last connection in the toy's propulsion system. The moment the circuit closed, the tiny spaceship began to glow with a soft, warm light. Its miniature engines hummed to life with a sound like distant music, and the repaired wing flexed experimentally. The dragon's reaction was immediate and joyful. It launched itself from Marcus's shoulder, executing a series of aerial loops around the workshop before landing next to its restored toy. The tiny creature's entire body seemed to radiate happiness as it gently touched the spaceship with one claw, causing it to rise a few inches into the air and perform a graceful figure-8 pattern. Marcus watched in fascination as dragon and toy interacted. The spaceship responded to the dragon's movements like a faithful pet, following its gestures and mirroring its aerial maneuvers. It was clear that this wasn't just a toy. It was a companion, a friend that had been deeply missed during its time of disrepair. "You're welcome," Marcus said softly, though he wasn't sure the dragon understood his words. The creature turned toward him, and in its amber eyes, Marcus saw something that looked remarkably like gratitude. The dragon approached him slowly, then did something unexpected. It bowed, a formal, deliberate gesture that spoke of dignity and respect. As the dragon prepared to leave with its restored companion, Marcus felt a strange reluctance to see them go. The repair had been challenging, certainly, but also deeply satisfying in a way he hadn't experienced in years. There had been something almost magical about working on the tiny spaceship, about collaborating with a being whose intelligence was evident despite its diminutive size. The dragon paused at the edge of the workbench, its toy hovering nearby. It looked back at Marcus one last time, and he could have sworn he saw a promise in those ancient eyes, a suggestion that this meeting was not their last. Then, with a flutter of emerald wings and a soft musical hum from the repaired spaceship, both creatures disappeared through the workshop's ventilation system, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the lingering scent of ozone and starlight. Marcus returned to his regular work, but something had changed. As he repaired a broken food processor for Mrs. Valdez from level 12, he found himself thinking about the precision required for the dragon's toy, about the intelligence he'd seen in those amber eyes, and about the way the tiny creature had understood engineering principles that most sentient species struggled with. Over the following days, Marcus began to pay more attention to the small details around his shop. He noticed things he'd previously overlooked, tiny scratches on certain surfaces that seemed almost like writing, faint energy signatures that registered on his most sensitive instruments, and the occasional glimpse of movement in his peripheral vision that vanished whenever he looked directly. His regular customers began to comment on the improvements in his work. Repairs that should have taken hours were completed in minutes, and devices that others had declared irreparable seemed to respond to his touch with renewed vigor. Marcus couldn't explain the change, but he felt as though his understanding of machinery had deepened, as if working on the dragon's toy had unlocked some new level of comprehension. It was exactly 1 week after the dragon's visit that Marcus encountered his first hint of the larger implications of what had transpired. He was closing up shop, securing his tools, and running the daily diagnostics on his equipment, when his communication array received an unusual signal. The transmission was unlike anything in the standard databases, a complex pattern of frequencies that seemed to pulse with intentional rhythm. Marcus ran the signal through his analysis software, but the computer couldn't identify the source or decode the message. However, when he played the audio representation of the signal, he could swear he heard something familiar in its cadence, the same musical quality that had emanated from the tiny spaceship's engines. Marcus spent the evening analyzing the signal, but its origin remained a mystery. The transmission appeared to be coming from somewhere deep in space, far beyond the normal range of civilian communication equipment. Yet somehow, his modest repair shop had received it clearly enough to record. As he prepared for sleep in his small apartment above the shop, Marcus found himself wondering about the dragon and its remarkable toy. Where had such a creature come from? How had it known to bring its damaged companion to him, of all the repair shops on the station? And why did he feel as though the entire encounter had been some kind of test? The questions followed him into his dreams, where tiny dragons with ancient eyes flew alongside impossible spaceships through seas of stars, and where the act of repair became something approaching art. In his sleeping mind, Marcus saw vast cities built by creatures no larger than his thumb, civilizations that spanned galaxies despite their inhabitants' diminutive size, and technologies that made the most advanced human achievements seem primitive by comparison. When he woke, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his dreams had been more than simple products of his subconscious. They had felt like memories, or perhaps visions of something that existed just beyond the edge of his understanding. He made coffee in his small kitchenette and tried to focus on the day ahead, but the images from his dreams lingered with startling clarity. As he opened his shop that morning, Marcus discovered something that made his heart race. There, on his workbench, exactly where he'd repair the dragon's toy, was a single scale. It was no larger than his pinky nail, but it shimmered with the same emerald and gold coloration he remembered. When he picked it up, the scale felt warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. Marcus carefully placed the scale in a small protective case, uncertain of its significance, but knowing instinctively that it was important. Throughout the day, as he worked on various repairs, he found his gaze drifting to the case and wondering what message the dragon might have been trying to leave behind. The scale seemed to respond to his attention, growing brighter whenever he looked at it directly. By evening, Marcus was certain that it was more than just a simple biological artifact. It was some form of communication device, or perhaps a key to understanding something far larger than a simple toy repair. As another day ended on Station Gamma 7, Marcus stood in his workshop surrounded by the familiar chaos of his trade, holding a dragon scale that glowed like a captured star and pondering the possibility that his small act of kindness had set something momentous into motion. He had no way of knowing that in the vast reaches of space, ancient beings were taking notice of the human who had shown such care and skill in mending what others might have dismissed as a mere trinket. The dragon's toy flew onward through dimensions Marcus couldn't imagine, carrying with it the memory of gentle hands and patient craftsmanship, while its tiny companion reported to beings whose power and wisdom spanned eons. And in a repair shop on a forgotten space station, a former soldier held a dragon scale and wondered what tomorrow might bring. 3 weeks had passed since the dragon's visit, and Marcus's life had taken on an increasingly surreal quality. The scale now resided in a place of honor on his workbench, pulsing gently whenever he worked on particularly complex repairs. His skills had improved dramatically, as if touching that tiny piece of dragon biology had somehow enhanced his understanding of mechanical systems. Regular customers had begun bringing him items that other repair shops had declared hopeless. Yesterday, he'd successfully restored a quantum processor that had been damaged in a solar flare, work that should have required a specialized facility and a team of experts. Instead, Marcus had completed the repair in his cramped workshop, guided by instincts he couldn't explain. The mysterious transmissions had continued as well, arriving at irregular intervals, but always carrying that same musical quality he'd first noticed. Marcus had begun recording and analyzing each signal, building a database that now contained over 40 distinct messages. While he couldn't decode their meaning, patterns were emerging, mathematical relationships that suggested a sophisticated communication protocol. It was during the morning rush on a particularly busy Tuesday when everything changed again. Marcus was deep in concentration, rebuilding the drive core of a cargo hauler's navigation system, when the shop's environmental sensors began registering anomalous readings. The air pressure dropped slightly, temperature fluctuated by several degrees, and his electromagnetic field detectors started picking up signatures unlike anything in their databases. Through the perpetual hum of Station Gamma 7's life support systems, Marcus heard something new, a harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull itself. The dragon scale on his workbench began glowing more intensely, its light shifting from warm gold to brilliant white. Marcus set down his tools and moved toward the scale, but before he could reach it, something extraordinary happened. The air above his workbench began to shimmer, like heat distortion rising from sun-baked pavement. The shimmer grew more pronounced, and gradually, shapes began to resolve within the distortion. First came the dragons, not one, but dozens of them, each no larger than the original visitor, but displaying a remarkable variety of colors and patterns. They emerged from what appeared to be a fold in space itself, their scales reflecting hues that shouldn't have been possible. Deep purples that seemed to contain entire nebulae, silvers that held the light of distant stars, and golds that pulsed with the rhythm of living suns. Behind the dragons came their companions, an armada of tiny spacecraft that defied every principle of physics Marcus understood. Some were organic in appearance, grown rather than built, their whole surfaces rippling like living skin. Others were crystalline structures that caught and refracted light in impossible ways, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. A few appear to be made of pure energy, their forms shifting and flowing like controlled lightning. The original dragon Marcus had helped spotted him immediately and flew over to perch on his shoulder, chittering excitedly to its companions. The tiny spaceship he'd repaired hovered nearby, its hull now bearing intricate new markings that hadn't been there before, symbols that seemed to move and change when viewed peripherally. As Marcus watched in stunned amazement, the dragons and their vessels began to organize themselves throughout his workshop. They moved with obvious purpose, examining his tools, his repair techniques, and the various projects scattered around the space. Several dragons landed near his computer terminal and began manipulating the interface with their claws, somehow able to operate human technology despite their size. One dragon, larger than the others and bearing scales that shifted through every color of the spectrum, approached Marcus directly. When it spoke, its voice was transmitted not through sound but directly into Marcus's mind, a gentle presence that felt ancient beyond measure. "Human Marcus-chun," the voice said, carrying undertones of warmth and respect. "You have shown kindness to one of our young scouts and skill in the repair of our most cherished technologies. We have observed your work, and we are impressed." Marcus found his voice after several seconds of shocked silence. You're telepathic? And you've been watching me?" "We are many things," the dragon replied, settling onto the workbench where it could look directly at Marcus. "Our species has existed since before your star formed, and We have learned to communicate in ways that transcend the limitations of sound and gesture. As for observation, yes, we have monitored your activities since young Zephyr first brought her companion to your skilled hands. The original dragon, Zephyr, apparently, trilled proudly from Marcus's shoulder, while her toy performed a series of aerobatic maneuvers that clearly served as some form of greeting or celebration. We are called the Astrolites, the elder dragon continued, though that is a rough translation into concepts your species can comprehend. We are builders, creators, guardians of technologies that span dimensions and realities. For eons, we have watched the younger races develop, occasionally guiding those who show particular promise. Marcus gestured around his cluttered workshop. And do you think I show promise? I'm just a repair guy who fixes broken appliances. The elder dragon's mental laughter was like the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Just a repair specialist? Human Marcus, you restored Zephyr's companion using nothing but crude tools and intuitive understanding. That device contains technology that most civilizations would require centuries to comprehend. Yet you diagnosed its problems and implemented solutions that our own craftspeople found elegant and creative. As if to demonstrate the point, several dragons began projecting holographic displays that showed Marcus's repair work in extraordinary detail. He watched himself working on the tiny spaceship, but the hologram revealed layers of complexity he'd never seen. Energy fields danced through microscopic channels. Quantum processors smaller than atoms performed calculations that bent space-time, and the entire device operated on principles that seemed to merge science with something approaching magic. The companion you repaired, the Elder continued, is not merely a toy. It is a scout vessel, capable of traveling between dimensions and observing realities beyond your current understanding. Young Zephyr was exploring this sector of space-time when her companion suffered damage from exposure to an exotic energy field. Marcus looked at Zephyr with new respect. The tiny dragon chirped and performed what might have been a modest bow. She brought the companion to you because our monitoring systems had identified you as the most skilled repair specialist within 3 parsecs, the Elder explained. What we did not anticipate was the intuitive understanding you would display or the creative solutions you would implement. You approached the repair not as a mechanic following procedures, but as an artist creating something new. The other dragons had been busy during this conversation, and Marcus began to notice significant changes occurring throughout his workshop. His tools were being subtly modified, enhanced with technologies he couldn't identify. His computer systems were being upgraded with hardware that seemed to grow rather than be installed. Even the walls themselves were changing, becoming smoother and somehow more responsive to his presence. "What's happening to my shop?" Marcus asked, though he felt no fear. The dragon's presence was accompanied by a sense of profound benevolence. "We are offering you a choice," the elder dragon replied. "Your skills and character have impressed us greatly. We would like to offer you the opportunity to become something more than a repair specialist serving a single space station." The air around Marcus shimmered again, and suddenly he could see beyond the confines of his workshop. Visions flooded his mind, vast cities that existed in folded space, where beings like himself worked alongside creatures from 1,000 different worlds to maintain technologies that preserved the stability of reality itself. He saw repair bays the size of planets, where damaged universes were restored to health by teams of specialists who understood the fundamental forces that held existence together. "We are offering you membership in the Guild of Makers," the Elder Dragon continued, "an organization of the most skilled craftspeople, engineers, and repair specialists from across the galaxy. Your role would be to help maintain and repair the technologies that keep entire civilizations functioning." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what was being offered. "But I'm human. I don't understand the technologies you're describing. Half of what I've seen today violates everything I know about physics." "Knowledge can be taught," the elder replied gently. "What cannot be taught is the intuitive understanding you possess," the ability to perceive the essence of a broken system and envision how it should function. This is a rare gift, one we have observed in fewer than one individual per million among any species. The dragons around the workshop continued their work, and Marcus could see his humble repair shop transforming into something extraordinary. New tools appeared, crafted from materials that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. His workbench expanded and reconfigured itself, gaining capabilities he'd never dreamed possible. Even his coffee maker was being enhanced, though he couldn't imagine what improvements could be made to such a simple device. You would retain ownership of this facility, the Elder Dragon explained, apparently reading his concerns. However, it would become a nexus point, a place where beings from across the galaxy could bring their most challenging repair problems. You would work on technologies that push the boundaries of possibility itself. Marcus looked around at the transformation occurring in his shop, then at the tiny dragon still perched on his shoulder. Zephyr nuzzled against his neck affectionately, and her companion performed a gentle loop around his head. "What would happen to my regular customers?" he asked. "Mrs. Valdez still needs someone to fix her food processor when it breaks down." The Elder Dragon's approval was palpable. "Your concern for those you already serve speaks well of your character. Fear not. This facility will continue to serve the beings of Station Gamma 7, but you will gain the tools and knowledge to serve them far better than before. A broken food processor will present no challenge to someone capable of repairing dimensional scout vessels." As the transformation of his workshop neared completion, Marcus felt a strange sensation building in his mind. Information was flowing into his consciousness, not overwhelming floods of data, but gentle streams of knowledge that seemed to integrate naturally with his existing understanding. He began to comprehend principles of engineering that human science hadn't yet discovered, to perceive relationships between matter and energy that opened entirely new possibilities for technological development. The process was surprisingly comfortable, like remembering things he'd somehow always known. Marcus realized that the knowledge wasn't being forced upon him. Rather, it was being made available for him to access as needed. The dragons weren't trying to change who he was, merely to expand his capabilities. "The choice is yours," the Elder Dragon said as the last of the modifications were completed. "You may accept our offer and join the Guild of Makers, taking your place among the most skilled repair specialists in the galaxy. Or you may decline, and we will restore your workshop to its previous state with no judgment or consequences." Marcus looked around his transformed workshop, then at the dozens of tiny dragons who watched him with expressions of hopeful expectation. The space was still recognizably his own, but it now hummed with potential he'd never imagined possible. Tools that could manipulate matter at the quantum level sat alongside his familiar plasma torch and molecular welder. Diagnostic equipment that could peer into the structure of reality itself occupied shelves next to his collection of spare parts. "If I accept," Marcus said slowly, "would I still be human?" "You would be human plus more," the Elder Dragon replied. "Your essential nature would remain unchanged, but your capabilities would expand dramatically. Think of it as becoming the person you were always meant to be, rather than becoming someone different." The offer was tempting beyond measure, but Marcus found himself thinking of his customers, his simple life on Station Gamma 7, and the satisfaction he'd found in honest repair work. Would joining something as vast as the Guild of Makers diminish that satisfaction, or enhance it? As if sensing his uncertainty, Zephyr launched herself from his shoulder and hovered in front of his face, chittering earnestly. Her companion joined her, projecting tiny holographic images that showed Marcus working on various projects, some familiar, others beyond his current understanding, but all clearly bringing him deep satisfaction. "Young Zephyr reminds me," the Elder Dragon said with obvious fondness, "that you have already begun the transformation simply by showing kindness to one of our scouts. The knowledge now available to you cannot be taken away, regardless of your decision. You will find that your repair skills have been permanently enhanced, and your understanding of mechanical systems has deepened considerably. Marcus reached out and gently stroked Zephyr's tiny head with one finger. The dragon leaned into his touch, purring like a miniature cat. What exactly would joining the guild involve, he asked. Initially, you would continue your work here while taking on occasional special assignments, the elder explained. Beings from across the galaxy would begin bringing you their most challenging repair problems. As your skills and confidence grew, you might choose to take on increasingly complex projects. Eventually, you could become a wandering craftsperson, traveling between star systems to solve problems that threaten entire civilizations. The scope was staggering, but something about it felt right to Marcus. He'd always been drawn to fixing things that others considered hopeless, finding satisfaction in bringing dead mechanisms back to life. The guild would simply expand the range of mechanisms he could repair. "I accept," Marcus said, surprising himself with the firmness of his decision. The response from the dragons was immediate and joyful. They launched themselves into the air, performing aerial displays that filled his workshop with swirling patterns of color and light. Their companion vessels joined the celebration, creating a symphony of harmonic resonances that seemed to resonate through his very bones. The elder dragon alighted on his workbench, scales now glowing with warm satisfaction. "Welcome to the Guild of Makers, craftsperson Marcus Chun. Your first assignment begins immediately." Marcus's first assignment as a guild member proved to be unlike anything he could have imagined. Within hours of accepting the position, his newly enhanced workshop received its first interdimensional visitor, a being that defied every concept of life he'd previously encountered. The entity appeared as a flowing mass of crystalline structures roughly the size of a human torso, its surface reflecting colors that seemed to exist outside the normal spectrum. When it spoke, the words formed directly in Marcus's mind, carrying undertones of desperate urgency. "Craftsperson Chun," the being communicated, "I am resonance of distant stars, representative of the harmonic collective. Our entire civilization faces extinction due to a cascade failure in our reality stabilization matrix. We have been directed to seek your assistance by the Guild of Makers." Marcus felt a moment of panic. Reality stabilization matrix? 3 hours ago, his most complex repair had been fixing a malfunctioning coffee maker. Now, he was being asked to save an entire civilization. The elder dragon, who had remained in his shop to observe his transition, projected calming thoughts. "Remember, craftsperson Chun, knowledge will flow to you as needed. Trust in your abilities, and let your enhanced understanding guide you." As if responding to the dragon's words, information began cascading through Marcus's consciousness. He suddenly understood that the harmonic collective was a species of living crystals whose existence depended on maintaining precise vibrational frequencies across multiple dimensional layers. Their technology was based on harmonics rather than traditional mechanics. They literally sang their devices into existence and maintained them through collective resonance. "Show me the problem," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. Resonance of distant stars produced what appeared to be a fragment of pure sound made solid, a crystalline structure that thrummed with barely contained energy. As Marcus examined it with his enhanced perception, he could see the damage immediately. The crystal's harmonic matrix had developed microfractures that were causing frequency distortions, spreading like a virus through the collective's entire technological infrastructure. "The cascade began 3 of your standard days ago," the being explained. "Our repair singers attempted to heal the damage, but their efforts only accelerated the degradation. Soon, our reality anchors will fail completely, and our dimension will collapse into quantum foam." Marcus carefully took the crystal fragment, feeling its vibrations resonate through his bones. The knowledge flooding his mind told him that harmonic collective technology was notoriously difficult for other species to repair. Their devices responded only to specific frequency combinations that had to be precisely calibrated to the quantum signature of their dimension. But as he studied the damaged crystal, Marcus began to perceive something his newly enhanced understanding revealed. The fractures weren't random. They followed a pattern that suggested the damage had been deliberately induced. Someone or something had introduced a dissonant frequency designed specifically to destroy harmonic collective technology. This wasn't an accident, Marcus said, looking up at the crystalline being. Your reality stabilization matrix was sabotaged. The reaction was immediate. Resonance of distant stars flared with brilliant light, its surface patterns shifting rapidly in what Marcus now recognized as extreme agitation. Impossible. Who would possess the knowledge to create such precise dissonance? And why would they target our collective? The elder dragon moved closer, its ancient eyes reflecting deep concern. This complicates matters considerably. If someone is actively targeting advanced civilizations, the guild must be informed immediately. Marcus was already examining the crystal more closely, his enhanced tools revealing details invisible to conventional analysis. The sabotage was elegant and sophisticated, a frequency virus that would lie dormant until it reached critical mass within the Harmonic Collective's network. Whoever had created it understood their technology better than most of the collective's own engineers. I can repair this, Marcus said with growing confidence. But it's going to require more than just fixing the fractures. We need to create a counter-virus that will spread through your network and neutralize the sabotage frequency wherever it's taken hold. Working with harmonic technology required an entirely different approach than Marcus was accustomed to. Instead of manipulating matter and energy, he found himself sculpting sound waves and crafting resonant frequencies. His enhanced understanding allowed him to perceive the mathematical relationships that govern the collective's technology, but implementing solutions required an intuitive grasp of harmony that pushed his abilities to their limits. The process took hours. Marcus worked with tools that generated pure tones and frequency modulations, carefully crafting a harmonic sequence that would not only repair the damaged matrix, but actively seek out and neutralize the sabotage virus. Resonance of distant stars assisted by providing real-time feedback on the effectiveness of each frequency adjustment. As the work progressed, other beings began arriving at Marcus's workshop. Word had apparently spread through the guild's communication network that a new craftsperson was handling a major crisis. Representatives from various civilizations appeared, some to offer assistance, others simply to observe. A delegation of energy wraiths materialized as shifting fields of controlled lightning, their forms crackling with barely contained power. They communicated through electromagnetic pulses that Marcus's enhanced mind translated automatically. Craftsperson Shun, our monitoring stations have detected similar sabotage patterns affecting stellar engineering projects throughout the Andromeda Spiral. This threat appears to be widespread. An ambassador from the Silicon Quartz arrived next, a geometric entity that resembled a living mathematical equation rendered in crystalline form. The computational realm has also experienced anomalous failures in our logic matrices. We had attributed them to natural evolution and universal constants, but your discovery suggests a more sinister explanation. As Marcus continued working on the harmonic virus, he began to realize the scope of what was happening. Someone with access to incredibly advanced technology was systematically targeting the most sophisticated civilizations in the galaxy, using weapons specifically designed to exploit each species' technological dependencies. The Harmonic Collective's sound-based technology was vulnerable to frequency attacks, while the computational realm's logic systems could be disrupted by paradox viruses. The pattern was becoming clear, and it terrified him. Whoever was behind this understood the fundamental principles underlying reality itself, the basic forces that allowed advanced civilizations to exist. They weren't just attacking individual species. They were undermining the technological foundations that held entire galactic clusters together. There, Marcus said, completing the final frequency sequence for the countervirus. The crystal fragment in his hands now pulsed with harmonious energy, its surface reflecting perfect geometric patterns. This should neutralize the sabotage frequency and restore your matrix stability. Resonance of distant stars accepted the repaired fragment reverently. The harmonics are beautiful, craftsperson Chun. You have not merely repaired our technology, you have improved it. The new resonance patterns will make our matrix more resilient to future attacks. As the Harmonic Collective's representative departed to implement the countervirus, Marcus found himself surrounded by the various alien ambassadors who had gathered to observe his work. Their presence was both honored and overwhelming. He could sense that some of these beings were older than Earth's entire solar system. The Elder Dragon spoke for the group. Craftsperson Chun, your work today has demonstrated something remarkable. You have not only solved a complex technical problem, but you have identified a threat that endangers multiple civilizations. The Guild of Makers has a responsibility to investigate this sabotage campaign and protect those who cannot defend themselves. An energy wraith flickered forward, its form stabilizing into something approximating human shape. Our species has existed since the first stars formed, and we have never encountered technology capable of crafting such precisely targeted attacks. Whoever is behind this possesses knowledge that rivals our own. The Silicon Quartz ambassador generated a complex holographic display showing the sabotage patterns they had detected. We estimate that at least 47 different civilization types have been targeted. The attacks appear to be escalating in frequency and sophistication. Marcus studied the display, his enhanced understanding allowing him to perceive relationships that would have been invisible to his unaugmented mind. The attacks aren't random, he realized. They're following a specific pattern, targeting civilizations in order of their technological advancement. The goal isn't just to cause damage, it's to prevent the development of something specific. What kind of development would require such drastic prevention measures? The Elder Dragon asked. As Marcus contemplated the question, more information from his guild training began to surface. He understood now that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were approaching a critical threshold, a point where their combined knowledge and capabilities would allow them to undertake projects that could reshape reality itself. Someone was trying to prevent that achievement. They're afraid, Marcus said suddenly. Whoever is doing this fears what we might accomplish if we continue to advance. They're trying to keep us from reaching our full potential. The implications sent a chill through the assembled beings. If Marcus was correct, then the sabotage campaign was just the beginning. As galactic civilization continued to develop, the attacks would likely escalate until entire sectors of space were reduced to technological primitivism. We need more information, the Elder Dragon declared. Craftsperson Chun, your ability to identify and counter these sabotage techniques makes you uniquely qualified to investigate their source. Are you prepared to take on such a responsibility? Marcus looked around his transformed workshop, filled with beings whose existence challenged every assumption he'd held about life and consciousness. 3 days ago, he'd been a simple repair technician. Now he was being asked to help save galactic civilization from an unknown enemy. I'll need help, he said finally. This is bigger than any one person can handle. You will have all the support the guild can provide, the energy wraith assured him. Our monitoring networks span multiple galaxies. We can track sabotage events in real time and guide you to their sources. The Silicon Quartz ambassador added, our computational resources are at your disposal. We can model potential attack scenarios and predict likely targets. Over the following hours, Marcus found himself at the center of an impromptu war council. Beings representing dozens of advanced civilizations shared their knowledge of the sabotage campaign, building a comprehensive picture of the threat they faced. The enemy was sophisticated, patient, and possessed technology that seemed to operate outside normal physical laws. As the council session continued, Marcus began to notice something troubling. The attacks weren't just targeting technological systems. They were specifically designed to undermine the psychological foundations of each civilization's confidence in their own abilities. The Harmonic Collective had begun to question whether their reality singing was too dangerous to continue. The computational realm had started restricting their logic processing power to avoid potential paradox cascades. It's not enough to repair the damage, Marcus realized. We need to restore confidence as well as functionality. The enemy is trying to make us afraid of our own capabilities. The Elder Dragon nodded approvingly. Your insight grows deeper with each challenge, craftsperson Chun. Fear is indeed a weapon being wielded against us, perhaps the most dangerous one. As the council prepared to disperse, each representative committed to providing resources for Marcus's investigation. He would have access to technologies and databases that span the known galaxy, along with the expertise of beings whose knowledge encompassed millions of years of accumulated wisdom. But as Marcus prepared for what he was already thinking of as the greatest challenge of his life, he couldn't shake the feeling that the enemy was watching, learning, and adapting to everything the guild discovered. The next phase of the sabotage campaign would likely be more devastating than anything they'd seen so far. The tiny dragon Zephyr, who had remained quietly perched on his shoulder throughout the entire council session, suddenly chirped urgently and pointed toward the quantum communication array. A new signal was incoming, one that made Marcus's enhanced instruments scream warnings about exotic energy signatures and dimensional instabilities. Something's coming, Marcus announced to the departing ambassadors. Something big. The signal resolved into a transmission that bypassed every known communication protocol, appearing directly on Marcus's main display as text written in perfect English. The human repair technician has been noticed. Cease your interference or face consequences beyond your comprehension. The message was signed with a symbol that hurt to look at directly, a geometric pattern that seemed to twist through dimensions that shouldn't exist. As Marcus stared at it, he realized that his first assignment as a guild member had just become far more personal than anyone had anticipated. The enemy knew who he was, and they considered him enough of a threat to issue direct warnings. That, more than anything else, told Marcus that he was on the right track. Whatever these beings were afraid of, his involvement in countering their sabotage campaign had accelerated their timeline. The real battle was about to begin. The enemy's threat proved to be more than empty words. Within 6 hours of receiving the dimensional message, Marcus's workshop was subjected to an attack unlike anything the guild had encountered. Reality itself seemed to stutter and shift around the station, causing temporal anomalies that aged some objects by centuries while reversing others to their component atoms. Marcus found himself at the center of the chaos, protected by a sphere of stable space-time generated by the combined efforts of every guild representative still present. The Elder Dragon clung to his shoulder, its scales blazing with protective energy, while Zephyr and her companion performed rapid reconnaissance flights to assess the extent of the damage. "This is impossible," the energy wraith declared, its form flickering as it struggled to maintain coherence in the distorted space. No known technology can manipulate causality with such precision. Through the protective sphere, Marcus watched in horror as sections of Station Gamma 7 were systematically deconstructed at the molecular level. Entire decks simply ceased to exist, their matter redistributed according to equations that violated every known law of physics. But the attack wasn't random. It was deliberately sparing the civilian areas while focusing on anything connected to advanced technology. They're sending a message, Marcus realized. The attack is surgical. They could destroy the entire station, but they're choosing to demonstrate their power instead. The Silicon Quartz ambassador projected a rapid analysis of the attack patterns. The enemy is using recursive paradox loops to undermine local reality coherence. Each targeted system creates a logical impossibility that spreads to connected networks. It's brilliant and utterly ruthless. As Marcus watched the attack unfold, something in his enhanced understanding began to click into place. The enemy's technology operated by exploiting fundamental inconsistencies in how advanced civilizations interacted with reality. They weren't just attacking technological systems. They were attacking the philosophical frameworks that made advanced technology possible. "I need to get to the station's central core," Marcus announced suddenly. "If I can interface with their quantum processing matrix, I might be able to create a stability field that will neutralize the attack." The core is 3 kilometers away through space that's currently experiencing recursive temporal fractures, the Elder Dragon pointed out. "The journey would be extraordinarily dangerous." "Then, we'll make it less dangerous," Marcus replied, his mind racing through possibilities. "I have an idea, but I'm going to need Zephyr's help." The tiny dragon launched herself from the Elder's back, hovering in front of Marcus with obvious eagerness. Her companion vessel moved alongside her, its hull gleaming with readiness for action. Marcus addressed the assembled guild representatives. "Your technologies all operate on different fundamental principles: harmonics, logic processing, electromagnetic manipulation. The enemy's attacks work by creating inconsistencies between these different approaches. But what if we combine them in a way that's internally consistent?" The concept was audacious. No one had ever attempted to merge technologies from such radically different civilizational frameworks. The risks of catastrophic failure were enormous, but as another section of the station dissolved into quantum foam, Marcus realized they were rapidly running out of alternatives. "I'll need a small piece of technology from each of your species," Marcus continued. "Something that can interface with my human-built equipment without losing its essential characteristics." Working with desperate speed, the representatives provided what he requested. The Harmonic Collective's ambassador manifested a resonance crystal that sang with the frequencies of dying stars. The energy wraiths condensed a portion of their essence into a containment matrix that crackled with barely controlled lightning. The Silicon Quartz created a logic core that processed information at rates approaching the speed of thought itself. Marcus's enhanced understanding allowed him to perceive how these seemingly incompatible technologies might work together, but implementing the integration required skills he'd never tested. He found himself crafting connections that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating interfaces that bridged not just different technologies, but different ways of understanding reality itself. Zephyr and her companion proved invaluable during the integration process. The tiny dragon's scout vessel possessed dimensional capabilities that allowed it to serve as a stabilizing influence, preventing the hybrid device from tearing itself apart as its component systems tried to assert dominance over one another. "It's working," Marcus breathed as the hybrid device achieved stable operation. The resulting technology was unlike anything that had ever existed. A fusion of approaches to reality manipulation that somehow made each component system more powerful than it had been individually. The device resembled a complex geometric sculpture crossed with a musical instrument, its surfaces alternately solid matter, controlled energy, and pure mathematical concepts made manifest. When Marcus activated it, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Reality around Station Gamma 7 began to reassert itself as the hybrid device projected fields that reinforced causality and prevented paradox formation. The enemy's attack faltered as their recursive loops encountered resistance they hadn't anticipated. Within minutes, the station structure had stabilized, though entire sections remained damaged or missing. But Marcus realized that their defensive victory was only the beginning. The attack had provided valuable intelligence about their enemy's capabilities and limitations. More importantly, the hybrid device had demonstrated something unprecedented, that technologies from different civilizational frameworks could be combined to create effects beyond what any individual species could achieve. "We've just proven something that changes everything," Marcus announced to the assembled representatives. "The enemy's greatest fear isn't our individual advancement. It's our potential for collaboration." The Elder Dragon's eyes blazed with sudden understanding. "Of course, they've been trying to isolate us, to prevent exactly this kind of technological synthesis. Our combined capabilities represent something they can't counter." Before anyone could respond, The workshop's communication array activated again. This time, instead of a threatening message, they received something far more disturbing, a holographic projection of the enemy themselves. The beings that appeared were disturbingly familiar, yet utterly alien. They resembled humans in basic structure, but their forms seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. Their faces shifted between expressions of superiority and barely contained fury as they regarded the assembled guild representatives. "Greetings, primitive species." The lead figure spoke in perfect English, though its voice carried harmonics that suggested communication methods far more advanced than simple sound. "I am First Architect Vexnull of the Pre-March Collective. Your recent activities have forced us to reveal ourselves earlier than planned." Marcus felt a chill of recognition as he studied the being's features. Beneath the dimensional distortions and temporal anomalies, he could see similarities to human facial structure that suggested a disturbing possibility. "You're human," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Or you were human once." Vexnull's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. "Perceptive repair technician. We were indeed once human, though that was so long ago that your species barely existed when we transcended our biological limitations. We have spent millions of years evolving beyond the crude matter-based existence that still constrains you." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. The enemy wasn't an alien species at all. They were humanity's distant future, returning to prevent the very evolution that had created them. It was a paradox that defied rational analysis. "Why?" the Elder Dragon demanded. "If you represent humanity's future evolution, why would you try to prevent your own development?" "Because we have seen where current galactic evolution leads," another Pre-March replied, its form flickering between dimensions. "The collaborative synthesis you just demonstrated will eventually result in the creation of technologies that threaten the fundamental structure of reality itself. We have traveled back through time to prevent that catastrophe." Marcus stared at the Primarchs, his mind reeling from the revelation. They claimed to be preventing a catastrophe, but their methods involved sabotaging countless civilizations and potentially condemning billions of beings to technological stagnation. "Show us," Marcus challenged. "If you're really trying to prevent a disaster, show us what you're afraid of." Vexnull gestured, and the air around the workshop filled with holographic projections that depicted scenes of unimaginable destruction. Galaxies collapsed into themselves as reality-altering technologies ran out of control. Civilizations transcended into energy patterns that consumed entire star clusters. The fundamental forces that held the universe together began to unravel as beings achieved godlike capabilities they couldn't properly control. "This is what your collaboration eventually produces," Vexnull declared. "Reality itself becomes unstable as countless species achieve transcendence simultaneously. The universe tears itself apart rather than accommodate the paradoxes created by unlimited technological advancement." Marcus studied the projections carefully, his enhanced understanding allowing him to analyze the scenarios being presented. Gradually, he began to perceive subtle inconsistencies in the data, assumptions built into the models that skewed the results toward catastrophic outcomes. "Your projections are based on flawed premises," Marcus announced. "You're assuming that advancement inevitably leads to recklessness, that transcendence requires abandoning responsibility. But what we've accomplished here proves the opposite." He gestured to the hybrid device, still humming with harmonic power. "We combined radically different technologies without losing control, without damaging reality. We achieved synthesis through careful integration and mutual respect for each other's approaches. A temporary success that proves nothing," Vexnull replied dismissively. "In time, your confidence will grow beyond your wisdom. You will attempt projects that exceed your ability to control, and reality will pay the price." "Then guide us," the Elder Dragon interjected suddenly. "If you possess the knowledge to prevent these disasters, share it with us instead of sabotaging our development." Help us find a path to advancement that doesn't threaten universal stability. The suggestion clearly caught the Primarchs off guard. For several moments, they conferred among themselves in languages that existed outside normal space-time, their forms flickering as they communicated through dimensional channels. Guidance has been tried, Vexnull finally replied. Other versions of ourselves have attempted to direct galactic development along safer paths. Each time, the civilizations we guided eventually exceeded our constraints and precipitated the same catastrophes we sought to prevent. Marcus felt a sudden flash of insight. You're trapped in a causal loop. Every time you try to prevent the disaster, your actions eventually contribute to causing it. But you keep making the same fundamental error. Explain, Vexnull demanded, its form solidifying as its attention focused entirely on Marcus. You're treating this as a problem that can be solved through control, Marcus replied. But the real solution isn't preventing advancement. It's ensuring that advancement includes the wisdom to use power responsibly. You can't force wisdom on people, but you can create conditions where wisdom emerges naturally. The concept seemed to resonate with something deep in the Primarch's collective consciousness. Marcus could see their forms becoming more stable, more human, as they contemplated possibilities they'd apparently never considered. What conditions would foster such wisdom? Another Primarch asked, its voice carrying overtones of genuine curiosity. Collaboration itself, Marcus answered. When civilizations work together, they naturally develop safeguards and ethical frameworks that prevent destructive applications of advanced technology. The synthesis we achieved here wasn't just technological, it was philosophical. The Elder Dragon nodded approvingly. Craftsperson, Chin speaks truly. The Guild of Makers has operated for eons without causing reality-threatening catastrophes precisely because we emphasize cooperation and responsibility alongside technical advancement. For the first time since their appearance, the Primarchs seemed uncertain. Their forms wavered between dimensions as they processed concepts that challenged millions of years of fixed thinking. You propose to solve an inevitable problem through cooperation that we have observed to be unsustainable, Vexnull said, but its voice lacked the earlier conviction. Then, observe more carefully, Marcus challenged. Stop sabotaging our development, and instead watch what we accomplish when we're allowed to work together freely. If we really are heading toward catastrophe, it will become apparent soon enough. But if we're finding a better path, your interference is the only thing preventing us from achieving it. The silence that followed stretched for what felt like hours, though Marcus's enhanced perception told him only minutes had passed. The Primarchs continued their dimensional communications, apparently debating possibilities they'd never seriously considered before. Finally, Vexnull spoke again. We will withdraw our sabotage efforts temporarily and observe your progress. But understand, if your collaborative synthesis begins to produce technologies that threaten universal stability, we will intervene decisively. That's all we ask, Marcus replied. The chance to prove that advancement and wisdom can develop together. As the pre-March projections faded, the workshop fell silent except for the gentle humming of the hybrid device and Zephyr's contented purring from Marcus's shoulder. The various guild representatives began to stir, apparently processing the implications of what had just occurred. You realize, the Elder Dragon said thoughtfully, that you've just committed the entire galactic community to proving that billions of years of technological development can avoid the disasters that destroyed our future descendants. Marcus looked around his transformed workshop, then at the tiny dragon who had started this entire adventure by bringing him a broken toy to fix. The irony wasn't lost on him. The most important repair job of his life hadn't involved fixing a machine at all, but rather repairing a relationship between the past and future of galactic civilization. No pressure at all, Marcus replied with a grin that surprised him with its confidence. But, you know what? I think we're going to be just fine. After all, we've already proven that the most complex problems can be solved when different types of intelligence work together respectfully. Zephyr chirped approvingly and nuzzled his neck, while her companion vessel performed a celebratory loop around the workshop. The guild representatives began making preparations to return to their respective civilizations with news of their victory. But Marcus knew the real work was just beginning. He had helped forge a new alliance between past and future, between different approaches to understanding reality, and between the fear of power and the wisdom to use it responsibly. The tiny dragon's broken toy had led to discoveries that would reshape galactic civilization for eons to come. As Station Gamma 7 began the slow process of repair and reconstruction, Marcus started planning the workshop's next configuration. There would be new tools to craft, new technologies to integrate, and new challenges that would require the combined wisdom of countless civilizations working together. But first, he had a promise to keep to Mrs. Valdez about her food processor. After all, some things never changed, including a good repair technician's commitment to serving all customers, no matter how small their problems might seem in the grand scheme of things. The universe had a funny way of teaching the most important lessons through the simplest acts of kindness.